Our last guest is a shape-shifting artist that remains true to themselves no matter what the universe puts them through. They have a way of turning the mundane into the magical, and through their music, there's a less sense of mix of lo-fi indie rock, country, and witty electro-pop brought to life with his confessional songwriting and affecting countertenor voice. In their latest album, Homo Anxietatum, he immerses their listeners in his feelings, sharing his fears and how he copes with them with 90s pop and rock influences. Here now to share more is singer, songwriter, and musician Shamir. Hi,
Hi.
Shamir. How are you?
Hi. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, talk to me a little bit about what this moment feels like. The album is now out, people are listening to it. How does that feel?
It feels great. I made it last summer, in London, and you know how albums go. It's always a long time coming, so it's always great when it's finally out.
Yeah. Now, of course, we are going to get this is like now your ninth album. We're going to get into the specifics of it, but I want to know a little bit about your origin. How did you fall in love with music? What was that like?
I think I fell in love with music. I think the earliest I can remember is through my aunt.
Okay.
My mom's twin. She will have like a bunch of musicians over, and they would just like write songs, and they, would let me sit in on the sessions. I was like maybe like in kindergarten or maybe even like younger, and
Wow.
I'd be like, I'll be quiet, and they'll let me sit in, and that I would just watch all these songwriting sessions happen, and like that was kind of like my first introduction, and that was really it too, because no one else in my family does music. Even my aunt, she didn't sing or play anything. That's why she rounded up all these musicians.
Okay. Wow. That's even great teachers in a sense, though, to start and like launch your career with music. Now, I know something that's also special is that you are a non binary artist. And I love to see that, especially in the space of music. Talk to me about even stepping into the scene as a non binary artist. What was that like? What did representation even look like?
Well, I started almost a decade ago, and there was, I mean, that was new terminology in 2014, and I was kind of one of the first artists to use that terminology like very openly. And at that time, it was really hard, because I felt like I just spent that whole chunk of my career just educating people.
Yeah.
And it's way more chill now because everyone knows what non-binary means. So that's like nice.
Yeah, and especially I think too, like in the music that you write, you are able to express being non-binary. You're able to share some of the stories that are personal to you. How special is that for you to be able to do now that maybe, even when you did it 10 years ago when you started, maybe wasn't as accepted or as received by people?
It wasn't even so much that it wasn't as accepted or as received. It was more so that it was exploited because it was something so new to the masses. Um, Whereas like, now, and especially with like rainbow capitalism, like, the concept of queerness is just kind of like everywhere, and is mainstream in a lot of ways, in a way that like it wasn't 10 years ago or even before that, so I think a lot of queer artists before then were just really kind of, for lack of a better word, fetishized.
Yeah, and you mentioned that too about queer artists. You've had the opportunity to work with some of them, even including Troye Sivan, which I love. What has it been like to work with other queer artists? Anything that you've learned from them or have inspired you in your work that you do?
I think it's just important to, you know what I mean, to create that community. Because it's still, even though now it's more open and less taboo, um, there's still room for representation, um, including just in the sense of like, expanding what it means to be a queer artist. I think, again, through rainbow capitalism and kind of as uh, the concept of queerness becomes more mainstream, it starts to look a little one dimensional.
Right.
And so I think it's really important. I think it's really important for me to exist. And the only reason why I continue to work in this crazy business is that, I want to kind of like give another example of like what it could look like to be a queer artist.
Now, obviously, I do want to get into this album. Homo Anxietatum is out. Talk to me, especially how the name came about.
I was watching a video about anxiety, and yeah, the Latin term came up in the video, and I thought that it sounded cool. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Yeah. Well, even with some of the songs too that you have in there, obviously your work is so personal. You put a lot of the lyrics, the words, the sound even kind of takes you on this journey. But I know that this album too has some songs that you wrote when you were, one of them, the beginning was written when you were 14 years old. You have
Mhm.
another song that you pulled from the archives. Why was it special to pull these songs into this album?
Well, some of them was more purposeful, like crime and like obsession, because those were songs that at the time I was told no one wants to hear. Um, and but they always were, true to my soul and to my being. And then a song like The Beginning, that one was just like happenstance and was just like while we were making the record, it was getting real emo, and I was like, we need a fun one. and I wanted to originally do a cover that had similar chords, and it was a weird one because the specific song was not studio recorded, so it's like, oh, it might be like hard to license. And then I remembered that I had the song that had a similar chord progression, and I was like, we should
Nice.
just record this one.
Oh, that's exciting. Was it fun to kind of, in a sense, be able to go back to some of the songs that you've written? Or even, I'm sure, like in the process of choosing what songs you would pull into this new album, like having to re listen to a bunch of different songs. How was that journey to kind of go back and forth?
Um, it was more again like with The Beginning because that one was completely unexpected. The other ones like were just songs that were always close to me, but specifically a song like The Beginning, I didn't even have the demo, the original demo. I actually
Okay.
had to pull it from YouTube that like a fan had uploaded and had the demo for,
Oh my God,
and
shout
that's
out
what
to
we
the
worked
fan.
from.
I
Yeah,
know.
shout out to the fans.
No, that's incredible. Now, of course, with this album too, what do you hope people do take away from the story, or even on the journey that it takes them through with the album? What do you hope they take away from it?
I stopped doing that with like my last album. I I think it's, I have my own personal relationships with my songs and with my music, and um and that's fine, but I guess I don't want to project what it means to me onto other people. And I kind of like now gotten to a point, I think not only just like in my artistic journey, but also just like in my career of just like wanting people to have their own journeys with it and not telling them what to take away from it and just to take away from it what they feel, you know?
Yeah, kind of letting them go on that journey on their own. I love that.
Yeah.
And, what would you say too for other artists who are non binary, or even in this queer space about getting started in music? What advice would you give them?
Um, I would say take up as much space as possible. Even when you feel like you don't belong, you just be there. There's so many times where I don't feel like I belong, but I know that I should be there. And again, I do it not just for me, but to make sure that other people who are like me also take up that space and hold space for other people like them as well.
Yeah, I love that. And very important message right there of take up space. Thank you so much, Shamir, and congratulations. I know you have an upcoming tour, so people will definitely, will have to share that so people can check it out. But thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.